Really?
Nope. You guys are live now.
Yeah, hold on. Maybe it's my Gmail.
I shared it last week, so you should just have access in your docs. But I digress.
Oh, okay. So it's a running document.
Yeah. Hello. Jordan Sheridan live. Status Coup. Joining by Zayna Day. It's going to be a wonderful show. Put together very last minute, but that's the best kind of show. We got a lot to get to. More in depth on what's going on at Cop City, which should scare the living bejesus out of you if you believe in the First Amendment, the right to protest, freedom of the press, because they're arresting journalists as well. So we're going to go a little bit more in depth on the arrests that are being made, the charges that are being charged. Tina, we don't have it ready yet, but Tina actually interviewed one of the protesters who was protesting in the forest. So we are going to hopefully have that ready tomorrow, but poor Colin needs some time to sleep since he's gotten back from Atlanta. And yeah, wait till you hear this interview with the protester. The protester was decently close to where Manuel Turan was shot and killed. So we'll get to hear from that protester on what actually happened. Because
And Jordan, just to clarify really quick, because you cut out, it sounded like you said Tina was protesting in the forest. She was covering protesters in the forest. I just wanted to make that clear because it kind of cut out there, but she was covering and interviewing protesters in the forest.
And just to make it clear, I'm going to go fucking nuclear soon on Comcast Xfinity, another monopoly, who is fucking up providing shitty internet, even though I pay a shit ton for internet. So hopefully we don't have a ton of problems today. But if I cut out or anything like that, I didn't get a chance to call them today because running around. But yes, Tina was covering the protests in the forest. And before she left, interviewed one of the protesters who was arrested, has been charged with domestic terrorism for the crime of occupying a tree on public land, by the way, in protest of this militarized police compound being built. So hopefully we'll have that interview tomorrow with the protester, and that protester will also be able to tell us what they saw and heard in regards to the killing of Manuel Turan, who, as Stephen Donziger pointed out yesterday, as far as we know, is the first environmental activist killed by police. It's a big deal. The media is only reporting it essentially as the police say it happened. And we're all smart enough to know not to just reflexively believe what the police say. If we reflexively believe what the police say, then to this day, we would have believed that George Floyd was some just medical emergency and unfortunate death. That was the official police count. We could go down the list of initial police accounts that were lies. So we'll get into that. We're also going to get into Marjorie Taylor Greene, who this is on her doorstep in Georgia, Cop City. She went on her BFF Tucker Carlson last night to rail against Antifa. So we'll show the difference, her response, quite a different response when it comes to environmental protesters, some Antifa protesters compared to January 6th. We'll see the difference there. Also, shockingly, Wall Street hedge fund moguls, they're not satisfied with the amount of layoffs that Amazon, Google, and other tech companies have made. Not enough for them. They want them to lay off more people because apparently they want to trim the overhead at these tech firms so that they could grease their profits because they're all invested in big tech. So we're going to get to that greed. And lastly, obviously Trump's being investigated for many, many things. So we're not going to play the when are the walls closing in game, but we will update you at least on the case that it seems, if he's going to be indicted, might come first. And that is the case in Georgia. And we might take calls if we fit it in quick enough. So with that, before we get to Marjorie Taylor Greene, Zaina, I think we both agree that we should go a little bit further into the charges that are being leveled against these protesters down at Cop City. We sort of skimmed the surface yesterday, but then Stephen Donziger came on and we ran out of time. But I think we should go through the documents because it's just, clearly flimsy, the charges against these protesters. In many ways, the charges are in the documents. They're explicitly stating they don't actually have evidence that these specific people that they're charging for certain things did the crime, and it's in the documents. And we should go through them because this is coming to a neighborhood where you live. If you're a viewer, if this is allowed to happen down at Cop City and these charges allowed to persist, like you said yesterday, this is the blueprint. They want to build similar compounds. And if you protest it, whether it's a police academy or a pipeline, you might be charged with domestic terrorism. So, Colin, let's bring it up. And if you could smash the like button, remember, folks, YouTube makes it tricky these days. So please smash the like button, share this live stream so we can get it out to more people. Also, we'll promote it a little bit later, but also remember this weekend we have our big fundraising weekend. We're going to have a bunch of great guests. Marianne Williamson, Nina Turner, Stephen Donziger, Christian Smalls, Frances Fisher, the actress, Alemi Aloran. Did I get it right this time? Yes. She's a movement lawyer and general badass. Chuck Modi, a journalist down in DC, kind of covers a lot of activism, sports. Have requests out to a bunch of others. Tina, Ron, myself, Zaina. It'll be a lot of fun. We're doing it Saturday and Sunday, noon to 3 Eastern. So if you could pull up the Substack article from yesterday, Colin, and I'll drop it in the super chat. If you folks want to read along. And remember, you could sign up to Substack for free. There is a paid option, but there is no, you can become a free Substack member. And we definitely suggest you do that if you haven't signed up to our Substack yet. There's great original content over at our Substack, but also also notifications for when we go live. So you get the original articles as well as, updates when we're going live. So best of both worlds. And that's at statuscoup.substack.com. So I think we should just go through one by one. Colin, if you have it up. So this is the Substack from yesterday. I didn't put it in the super chat, so let me go ahead and do that. And these were 5 protesters who were charged in December. So this was a round of protesters before the 7 that were arrested last week, but they're being charged with almost identical charges. So let's go to the first one. We've redacted the names and all that. So this one, it doesn't need a lot of commentary. It's pretty clear. It's flimsy. They say that this person is being charged with domestic terrorism for fleeing the Atlanta Police Department, an investigator causing injuries to said investigator, and right knee and right elbow, and said injuries are scrapes and cuts. We don't know what happened. We don't know how it played out. We don't know if they actually fled. Maybe they fled because the police officer was being violent. We don't know. But Zaina, by this account, any black or brown person that flees the police in America, if they're lucky enough not to get shot and killed, are they domestic terrorists too if they flee police?
Well, there's a lot of subtext here. We've seen this ramping up since what was it, mid-June 2021, as a reaction to the January 6th insurrection and protest. The Biden administration deeply expanded the powers of the Department of Homeland Security, and it specifically targets online organizing in general, and it paints dissent as terrorism. And we're kind of what I believe we're seeing here. I mean, initially when they passed these new regulations, they had written in national coherence as one of the benchmarks. So anyone that's going against national coherence could be arrested. That language has since been removed, but the rest was let in. And we're seeing, they're targeting conducted by lone offenders, small groups, acting furtherance of ideological beliefs and or personal grievances pose an ongoing threat to the nation. While the conditions underlying heightened threat and landscape have not significantly changed in the last year, convergence of the following factors has increased volatility. And they talk about how social media narratives, and we do know that there is real right-wing extremism. Extremism does exist, but what this strong arm is being used, and we can see it in these police reports as we look at them. So when you guys are looking at these police reports, I want you to look at what people were arrested for. I want you to see that what they are doing is wrapping this into a broader narrative so that they can slap this domestic terrorism label on it to serve as a chilling effect for the protest against Cop City, which is an $80 million project sprawling over dozens, if not hundreds of acres to further militarize the police in Atlanta. This is a chilling effect. It's sending a chilling effect, and they're using the strong arm of the Department of Homeland Security in order to thwart protest. And right now we're seeing here as these, 4 people have been arrested, 7 total have been arrested and labeled as domestic terrorism in order to scare anyone from coming in and protesting the erection of this massive public-private partnership that further industrializes the police in Atlanta and possibly being used as a benchmark nationwide.
And also, I mean, we already have a gross fetishizing of police in this country, but if it's now at the standard that a police officer gets some scrapes and bruises and you pin that on the protester for fleeing, so you're a domestic terrorist, well, I mean, there's a lot of people in this country that would call the police the domestic terrorists. I mean, it's beyond a slippery slope. It's way past slippery slope when you are essentially saying, basically what that is saying when you're charging someone with domestic terrorism because they are fleeing from police, and them fleeing induce minor injuries to a police officer. You are essentially saying resisting police is domestic terrorism, and there are many instances. Right. There are many instances where resisting police means life or death. There's a lot of, I think, privileged white people who, in their minds, well, if you resist police, you deserve what you got. The police officer has license to kill you. But speaking as a white person, I have never had to flee police, but I do know Black people who have said to me, I feel it's a 50-50. I could get killed either way, even if I stand there and do everything right. So it is, I don't know.
Which has happened over and over and over again. Right. You do everything that they say. I've had friends that talk about, their sons, and I've heard activists talk about how they've trained their sons. And I heard these lectures to my cousins, to my, Afro-Iranian cousins. Put your hands on the wheel, speak to the police this way. Otherwise you could be harmed. And so this is a lecture that the parents have to give their children because of police violence. So there's the bigger picture. And I don't use the F word lightly, but this is fascism. This is fascism. Call it what it is.
Oh, when I was at Standing Rock, I said, this is fascism. What do you call the public police? We pay for it through our tax dollars. Essentially brutalizing at that point indigenous people and their white allies on behalf of a private oil company. That is the merger of the state and corporations. That is fascism. In this case, it's not a pipeline, it's a police training center, i.e. compound, which has I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars of private money behind it. So it's the same thing. And I just want to show this because I think it's a valid question. Where did it go? Malena, please explain what happened because the news is saying the man shot at a police officer. I think if you are a true journalist, you would say, we don't know. We genuinely do not know what happened because unless you were a journalist there and witnessed it with your 2 eyes, all we know is a protester who, by all accounts, one of the big things they preached was civil disobedience, non-violent civil disobedience. This is the protester, 26-year-old Manuel Terran, known as Tortuguita, who was killed. By all the protesters that are speaking said that they were a real gentle soul, and one of their main philosophies in terms of protests was doing it in a non-violent way. So all we know is the police said that this person shot at them. However, logistically, the person was in a tent. I find it hard to believe that this person who preaches nonviolence would shoot through their tent at, I believe there were 5 or 6 officers there in that section of the woods doing the clearing out operation, essentially a raid by force. So a violent raid to get rid of all the protesters. So the truth is, we don't know. But unfortunately, 99.9% of the media in this country report it as fact that Tortuguita shot at the police because the police told them so. We learned through, I even remember, Zaina, some like CNN and some others did some like soul searching after George Floyd and said, you know, Brian Stelter, that blowhard when he was at CNN. Does the media have a police say problem? You remember that? Where they were doing some kind of reflection that maybe we should think twice before just reporting what the police say. So it is a journalistic epidemic where it's just regurgitated whatever police say. The police lied about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Harvey Milk, Gloria Steinem, Leonard Peltier. I could go on. So the truth is, to answer your question, we don't know what happened. My gut, just speculation as a journalist, no facts. I don't believe that this protester went commando style shooting at police. It just doesn't make any sense. And we do know that the police, as a tactic to try and shut down nonviolent protests, have implemented protests and said, well, it was the protesters who got violent to shut down the protest. So that's as far as we know.
And there's no body cam footage, even though we've seen pictures of police in that area wearing body cam footage. I understand that it's being pinned on the Georgia State Troopers, which it could be possible. I don't know. But we do know that DHS was on the ground, FBI was on the ground, Atlanta PD, as well as the Georgia State Police.
Yes.
So where's the body cam footage? Where the testimony from the people that heard the gunshots and heard what was happening had said that it sounded like friendly fire. This is their testimony, what several people on the ground are saying. The story isn't adding up. There is no body cam footage. And one thing that's already troubling, and Tortuguita's mother has spoken about, is that they are already trying to disparage this protester's name, which is one of the first things that the police do when an incident like this happens. And, you know, there's PR around it, is that there's always the disparaging of the victim who's been killed by police before the narratives come out, before the full story comes out. So I'm always suspicious as soon as right out of the gate, you know, there's, you know, stories about an individual's character before we even have all of the facts.
Absolutely. I want to keep going through this because it just gets more and more absurd, but also dangerous. So that first protester that was charged with domestic terrorism for fleeing from police and allegedly causing scrapes and cuts. There was a second charge to that protester for domestic terrorism. If you have that up, Colin, that second document. So they basically, and this isn't just for this protester, but the 4 other protesters, they basically say that they are guilty of domestic terrorism because they participated in actions as part of Defend the Atlanta Forest, a group classified by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security as domestic violent extremists. So essentially, they're accusing them of domestic terrorism by simply associating with this group. Remember, the Department of Homeland Security was born from 9/11. We know, at the very least, in the case of Standing Rock, the DHS was collaborating with the FBI and Tiger Swan. Tiger Swan was kind of like a Blackwater-esque private security company. And Tiger Swan, with the FBI, with the DHS, was surveilling the Standing Rock camps. So I remember when I was there, and others were talking like, why are these drones flying at all hours of the day? Part of that was the DHS, FBI, and this private contractor. The DHS, in addition to mass surveillance of the camps, the DHS with the FBI, with Tiger Swan, was responsible for infiltrating the camps with moles. One of those moles, forged a romantic relationship with one of the female leaders of the camp, which led to her arrest under very dubious circumstances, if you remember Red Fawn. So DHS, we don't have 3 hours, but there's a whole long list, including what DHS has done in terms of undocumented immigrants, ICE, all those things. So if DHS is branding protesters domestic extremists, I wouldn't put a lot of stock in that, but it is dangerous because, again, this is all coming to a neighborhood by you, whether it's an environmental protest, a protest against a police center, and this is happening under Democrats. Biden is totally for this. The Democratic, Senate, Schumer, they're all for this. They'll throw out woke language about other stuff.
Warnock and Ossoff have been silent on everything that's going on, even though it involves their state.
So, Republicans obviously have no problem with any of this and embrace it. We'll get to Marjorie Taylor Greene in a little bit. But this is a two-party thing. They are totally down with the police state. The Democratic Party, in response to George Floyd, kneeled with their kente cloth, spoke Black Lives Matter. So did banks, who ridiculously put Black Lives Matter on their websites and in their windows, and then went on to continue screwing minorities with higher interest rates and shittier mortgages. But the truth is, none of them give a shit about Black people. And essentially, they're just trying to entertain the swing white voter with, being tough on crime. So it's really vile, but the truth is, this has really dangerous ramifications because we already have right-wing governors trying to do this shit. DeSantis tried to, not only Florida, but other conservative states tried to pass laws that would make it legal to run over protesters with your car, that you would have no criminal penalty. That was happening under Republican governors, but Georgia's a Republican state technically, but it has 2 Democratic senators.
And the expansion literally happened under the Biden administration to go after protesters, specifically causing a chilling effect. The Biden administration wrote the rules that is allowing now the DHS to charge these individuals with domestic terrorism. The new rules are what are cited in these police reports.
Absolutely.
And so it is those changes to the DHS that is literally built to send a chilling effect. Now, people thought that was going to happen under the Trump administration because of the Black Lives Matter protest. We just saw that roll right into the Biden administration. And because of January 6th, the Biden administration, the Democrats, the Republicans, they all had this big open door in order to suppress protest. And all of them were on board. It's clear. They're not even hiding it.
Yeah. So let's read a little bit more of this, Doc, because I think, listen, the scrapes and bruises charge of domestic terrorism is crazy. This is even, in my view, just as dangerous. They write, the accused affirmed their cooperation with defend the Atlanta forest by throwing rocks at fire department and EMS workers, possessing road flares of the same style and type as have been used to set fires on the property, and possessing incendiary devices. Number one, throwing rocks at the fire department and EMS workers. Again, I have no proof. The police are not going to provide any proof that they did that. If they threw rocks and things like that, could you be charged with something? Sure. I mean, it's some civil disobedience has included, throwing things at police and things like that. However, that's not a domestic terrorism act. If you want to say assault or something like that. But again, they don't provide any evidence. Maybe rocks were thrown at police, and as police turned around, they looked at this one protester and, oh, it was you, right? We know this stuff happens all the time. I've seen it at protests where people who did nothing at all are grouped in or blamed for other acts of violence. But possessing road flares of the same style and type as have been used to set fires, I don't know, Zaina. I mean, if I'm protesting 24/7, day and night, and climbing and occupying a tree to stop that tree from getting cut down for them to build this potentially 200 to 300 acre compound in the woods, I might need flares for light in the dark, for other matters that I would need flares, not necessarily to start a fire. And in many cases, I've seen police start fires, particularly at Standing Rock, and then set the narrative that the protesters lit the fire. So again, this is just guilt by association. Somebody started a fire and you possess it.
They're not saying this person started a fire with the flares. They're just saying this person had the same brand of flares. How many brands of flares are there out there? I mean, if you go to a Walmart or a Costco or wherever you go to buy supplies, they're likely going to have the same brands in the area, right? So that's insane. It's not, this person is not being labeled a domestic terrorist because they set fire to something with flares and here's the something that they did. It's literally just bulking people in under an umbrella. It's very, I don't even see how this passes the muster for constitutionality. It feels very unconstitutional to me. It feels like, the Fourth Amendment is being bypassed with this because there is no clear cause and seizure, right? It's beyond me. And it's because the Department of Homeland Security under this umbrella, if people remember rendition, when America was, when the United States were arresting people across the globe and putting them in Guantanamo Bay and torturing them, by the way, and many of those people were found to be innocent later and had spent 10, 12, 14 years of their life behind bars being tortured and treated in horrific conditions. This is another layer to that overreach of the Department of Homeland Security, the flares. And then what the hell are incendiary devices? Could be matches to light the fires there in order to keep yourself warm and eat. Could be, a lighter. Could be fireworks, and with no motive, no use. They're arresting someone before a crime has even happened. This is far beyond reasonable doubt.
Well, no, they're explicitly saying they don't have evidence that this person started a fire, just that they possessed a flare. I mean, in court, unless it's the most conservative judges that are just going to side with the police, I don't think it rises to any burden of proof at all. Basically, they're just saying you are part of this group that are overlords in D.C. branded as domestic extremists, and therefore we're charging you with domestic terrorism for having the wrong shade of makeup. I mean, I don't mean to be light, but that's basically what it is. and it is meant to deter people from showing up and participating. Let's keep moving.
It's terrifying to me. That's the terror that I see here. It's terrifying.
Here's another protester. Again, we've redacted their names. Please make sure you smash that like button, by the way, so we can get this to more people. So this protester, they're accusing the affirmed of cooperating with the Defend Atlanta Forest by occupying a treehouse on the site, refusing to leave, and posting videos and calls for actions on social media site used by DTAF. So a few things. Number one, and Tina can explain this. We're hoping we'll get her on tomorrow because obviously she was there in the forest and reporting. But not all of a lot of this forest is public land, free to anyone to graze or climb a tree if they want. It's public land. It's not all of it is privately owned by the city of Atlanta. So occupying a treehouse, I don't know where this tree was, but a lot of the trees were on public land. Not all of a lot of it where they're protesting isn't technically even in the area that they're building Cop City. Some of the tree sitters are up in trees that is going to be where they want to build it, but refusing to leave and posting videos and calls for actions on social media sites. Wait a minute here. Where's all the, censorship, pro-speech absolutists or anti-censorship absolutists when you need them? This person's being charged with domestic terrorism for posting videos on the internet. I don't know. I would think that is a 100% free speech absolutist issue.
And calls to action, retweeting DTAF, which I've done. I've retweeted DTAF. I've shared out their petition, which their petition also has language about peaceful protest. This reminds me of the 1970s and early 1980s when environmental activists were being rounded up in order to suppress climate action. People from Greenpeace, for instance, were being arrested on the regular. So we have been here before. Things got better and then they got worse again. And it's very similar because you had people on the ground protesting coal mining in Appalachia and mountaintop removal. I know because I grew up in Appalachia and people were arrested and charged. But this new layer of domestic terrorism under the umbrella of our homeland security is something that we haven't seen before and is very dangerous. How do people combat this when it's beyond the judicial system? What kind of trials are these individuals going to get? Is it the same? Is it going to go through, the public courthouse? I have a lot of questions about this that I don't have the answers to yet, and it would be great to find out. But what is the process for someone that's labeled a domestic terrorist? How is that adjudicated?
Right. No, it's absolutely insane, and honestly, it is 100% meant. They're not, some of these January 6th protesters weren't even charged with that. Okay? Whatever you think of January 6th, I would say that's definitely more violent, more coordinated, more damaging than trying to stop the building of a $90 million police compound by committing the crime of tree sitting. That's what they're doing. They're climbing up trees. It's
at least 15 Republicans in Congress right now called for people to come to January 6th and cheered people on as they busted through and entered the Capitol building. And they're sitting in Congress. Yet these people in Atlanta who are fighting for one of the last green spaces in the city, for indigenous lands, against environmental pollution, against advancement of the police state, they're arrested and labeled domestic terrorists.
Yeah, 100%. Let's keep going here. So this third protester, the accused affirmed their cooperation, again, with the DTAF group by throwing rocks at the fire department. Oh, no, I think that was the same one I just read. 1, 2, 3. All right. I'm on the fourth one, Colin. The accused affirmed their cooperation with DTAF by throwing rocks at the fire department and EMS workers following a request for action by other DTAF members. So, again, saying a protester threw rocks based on a request from others. It seems very flimsy. Again, even if someone legitimately did throw rocks at police, sure, you could charge them with something. Domestic terrorism is well beyond anything you would normally charge someone. I've seen water bottles thrown at police and other things thrown at police. You're not throwing a deadly object at them. This is what they say in Israel. Palestinians are terrorists because they're throwing rocks, and the rocks could kill Israeli soldiers. Stop. Stop.
It is the same line. And the fourth one that you're about to show, because there is one more, I think is a really telling one as well, because this one kind of made my jaw drop also.
Hold on. You want to read that one?
Yeah, let's see here. The accused affirmed their cooperation with DTAF by occupying a treehouse while wearing a gas mask and camouflage clothing. So apparently the type of clothing you wear and having a gas mask with you makes you a domestic terrorist. Yet for the last 3 years, we've seen so many rallies I've been to, so many protests. Tina's covered many of them. We've had people armed with AK-47s standing out in front of State House buildings, from the Proud Boys and from other right-wing supremacist groups that are literally chanting things like blood and soil, death to, Jewish people, racist slurs, calling for, violence, standing in front of a state house with weapons in camouflage, sometimes with gas masks. How many times have we seen this? Yet these individuals in Atlanta are being arrested. This guy had on, this person, whoever it was, had on camouflage and had a gas mask with them, apparently, and that labels them as a domestic terrorist. And I'm not saying, I'm for free speech. So I'm not saying that we should be arresting everyone at the Capitol buildings because they're coming there in camouflage. I would never support that, even if they had hateful rhetoric, because I do support the First Amendment. But this is, like I said, I do not understand how this is constitutional. If they were arrested for trespassing, I don't agree with it because I support the protesters, but that's at least in the scope of what I feel like could be potentially argued in any kind of way. But no, they are labeled domestic terrorists for wearing camouflage. So apparently how you dress now can get you labeled as a domestic terrorist in this country.
Right. And the last one, the accused affirmed their cooperation with DTAF by being located on the property while wearing camouflage clothing and possessing incendiary devices. So again, same thing. And again, whatever incendiary devices, I don't know. That's kind of like, that last line that the job description has, and performing other tasks as needed, which basically creates like a blanket for like, well, you could be doing 2 or 3 other jobs. That's what incendiary devices mean. I mean, that could mean anything. I don't know what incendiary devices means.
It could be matches, fireworks, pop bottle caps. It could be any, yeah. And the fact that they don't list what it is, what the incendiary devices are, is telling, because they listed out the flares earlier, right, which was also a really weak weak a charge, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to move on to Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I would say that everyone should care about this. Even like you don't have to like hate the police. I mean, I've called the police in my life, and as a white person, I was very lucky that they responded quickly and were very kind and gentle to me. I'm one of the lucky ones. So we're not, I'm not saying down with the police, but you cannot create a system in this country where normal protests, even some aggressive forms of protest, these charges, you could say that the civil rights protests of the 50s and 60s, the tactics they used, they would have been branded domestic terrorists or worse, based on the flimsiness of this. And this should be a cross-partisan thing. Conservatives should care about this. Libertarians should care about this. Neoliberals should care about this, because it doesn't really matter. I mean, look, a congressperson's kid just got arrested for protesting Cop City in Boston. She's not going to be charged with domestic terrorism because she's a congressman's kid. She'll probably get off on probation because she's a congressman's kid. The rest of you, not so lucky. Not so lucky at all. And we already have outside.
Buttercup says police reports are the first official lie to set the narratives.
There you go.
That's right.
And by the way, we already have outside of this, you already have journalists showing up and police jamming the signals so that you can't broadcast live to show what's going on. Or you can broadcast live and it's badly interrupted and buffering nonstop. We've had that happen. We had that happen outside Jeff Bezos's home during protests outside his home in Beverly Hills. You already have activists and journalists who are followed by police, private mercenary types. So there's already a lot that's stacked against protest movements in this country, not to mention the media, who are antagonists to most protest movements right out of the gate. I mean, remember Don Lemon like arguing with Black Lives Matter protesters in Ferguson. But this is too far. And I think Stephen Donziger said it best.
There's an economic bent to this, Jordan, this massive thing that they're building in Atlanta, this privatized, police academy supported by multiple corporations, which we showed yesterday on the show. We had Home Depot, Wells Fargo, Citibank, a whole bunch of companies who have back funneled this through the police foundation. But you also have an increase of homelessness across the country, including in Atlanta. Median average incomes going down, housing costs going up, food insecurity. So there's all these economic problems in Atlanta. They're building a police force to combat these problems in a massive training facility. Instead of addressing the economic problems, they're going to mow over one of the last green spaces in Atlanta, an indigenous forest, in order to build this. When that 80 million could have gone to housing, could have gone to the schools, could have gone to economic development, could have gone to job growth. And then you also, on top of that, have this chilling effect of labeling people as domestic terrorists who, are going to stand in opposition or protest any of these problems that we're facing across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember, smash that like button, share this live stream. Reminder, this weekend, we got 2 big shows. We're doing 2 special shows this weekend, Saturday and Sunday, noon Eastern to 3 p.m. Eastern. We're going to have Marianne Williamson, Nina Turner, Christian Smalls of the Amazon Labor Union, Stephen Donziger again, Chuck Modi, independent journalist, Frances Fisher, the actress, Olemi Alori, movement lawyer, and Zaina, Tina, Ron, Kim Brown, the whole gang, Steve Grumbine, So this weekend, mega shows. We're going to try to fundraise so we can raise more money to do more on the ground reporting. So definitely tune in noon to 3 o'clock Eastern time on Saturday and Sunday. Will be before the football game. If any of you are concerned with that, don't you worry. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who in some quarters of the left, I use left with the air quotes, some people are saying Marjorie Taylor Greene is out-lefting the squad on this and that. It's beyond laughable. Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way, for all those that say she's out-lefting people on Ukraine, she just happened to have purchased stock in Lockheed Martin like the day Russia invaded Ukraine. But we'll put that aside. That fact doesn't matter. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, shockingly, Cop City, of course, is in Georgia. So she went on Tucker Carlson's show. Tucker Carlson, the Great Replacement Theory, Tucker Carlson, the drag queen story is coming for your kid, Tucker Carlson, what did he call Iraqis, primitive apes or monkeys, Tucker Carlson. I could go on. Honestly, it seems crazy to say it, Zaina, but sometimes I say, wow, I thought Bill O'Reilly was bad, but geez, some days Bill O'Reilly wasn't to this level that Tucker Carlson has become. But I digress. Let's see Marjorie Taylor Greene really, really aghast at Antifa and these domestic terrorists down in Cop City.
Georgia in the Congress. She joins us tonight. Marjorie Taylor Greene represents Georgia in the Congress. She joins us tonight. Congresswoman, this happened in your state. I'm just amazed by how little we know. There's this militia that kind of floats around America, and when needed, they show up and start burning buildings and flipping over police cars, and no one knows who they are or who's paying for this. How can that be?
Well, Tucker, you laid it out just perfectly. And I think, honestly, America is sick and tired of Antifa. Look at what they've done over years now. Just from 2020, they're responsible for nearly $2 billion in damage and many people dead. But the war is against the police. And the reason why is because Antifa is the ground troops of the Democrat Party. Not only are they the ground troops, they breed them, they raise them, and then they bail them out of jail when they get arrested. But they never get prosecuted. And that's because, well, we know the truth. It's the Democrats in control, and it's the establishment, and it's the unelected bureaucrats that make no apologies for their support of Antifa. Well, it's time to do something about Antifa, and that's why I'm going to introduce legislation to declare Antifa domestic terrorist, because they need to be taken apart. We need to investigate exactly who they are, who funds them, and then we need to make sure that whenever they come out and erupt in violence, attacking police officers and attacking businesses in cities like my city, in Atlanta, in Georgia, we need to make sure that they're arrested and charged with domestic terrorism charges, just like the GBI did this past weekend. Enough of Antifa. They are not the anti-fascists. They are the fascists. And they always show up and they defend Democrat causes. Not only do they attack police, but they defend the drag queens targeting our children with drag queen story time. They go after people when they're not vaccinated and demand they get vaccinated and wear masks during the so-called pandemic. But enough of Antifa. We've had it with them, and it's time to do something about it.
Yeah, that was kind of a tell, I would say. This is the anarchist group that's for vax mandates. Tell me how that works.
I have a hard time focusing because Tucker Carlson's laugh is so uncomfortable and cringeworthy and demonic. But putting that aside, I don't know where to start. I tweeted last night, I wonder how the over 40,000, the family of over 40,000 people in Georgia who died from COVID feel about her saying the so-called pandemic, but obviously that's a different story. I don't know, Zaina. It seems that Marjorie Taylor Greene feels that the Antifa, which, by the way, is maybe 2% of the people out protesting in Atlanta. I wasn't there, but Tina told me that was very little in terms of I mean, there were a lot of people in Atlanta protesting Cop City, including the 75% Black neighborhood that they are putting Cop City on the doorstep of. Does Marjorie Taylor Greene think they're domestic terrorists too? Because a lot of that neighborhood, that they're going to be inconvenienced and they're going to have to listen to police in their firing ammunition zones in the woods. They were out protesting. But I just find it interesting because Marjorie Taylor Greene, when it's protesters protesting against, she says she's always talking about the establishment. Well, they are protesting the establishment. There's nothing more establishment than the police and military industrial complex that is being plopped down onto a Black neighborhood. And she's saying that the people protesting that are the threats, I guess, for the crime of knocking down some windows and lighting a police car on fire. I don't hear her saying anything about the protester that was killed. But let's see how she responds to the January 6th insurrection. Yes, that's what it was. They were trying to stop the dude. I don't like Joe Biden, but he won. I mean, it is what it is. And they were trying to overthrow the official election results by force. They were calling to hang Mike Pence and all these things. In response to that, I don't believe she was calling them domestic terrorists. In fact, let's hear what they say about that.
Then January 6th happens, and next thing you know, I organized the whole thing along with Steve Bannon here. And I want to tell you something, if Steve Bannon and I had organized that, we would have won. Not to mention, it would have been armed. Yeah. See, that's the whole joke, isn't it? They say that whole thing was planned, and I'm like, are you kidding me? A bunch of conservatives, Second Amendment supporters went in the Capitol without guns, and they think that we organized that? I don't think so.
You see a difference there?
Yeah, but she also blames that on Antifa. She says Antifa are the ones who showed up, even though, but Antifa's an amorphous ideology. It just means anti-fascist. So the danger of, conservatives and Republicans continuing and some Democrats, hell, are saying it too, that Antifa is dangerous. You're basically saying anti-fascist. She said they are fascist, but she's one of the most fascist representatives out there. They all are, but MGT wears it on her sleeve, right?
He's openly said, I want a Christian nationalist country.
Yeah, she's openly said that. And it was just all gaslighting. It was just a bunch of BS, because she went on to talk about, the trans community. She went on to talk about masking, when actually a lot of anti-fascist and even people on the left didn't necessarily agree with vaccine mandates or necessarily mask mandates later. So that's one of those things that is sort of there's a lot of different ideologies, but she's labeling this one group that could be anyone. So one of the things that I saw in response to Tina's filming in real time, especially from folks that were more bent toward the right, was saying, look at all these Antifa members out here because people are dressed in black in this march. But people were dressed in black at the march because it was a mourning for Tortuguita. It was a mourning for a protester that was killed by the police. So people dressed in black. But because of this narrative, anyone could be labeled Antifa, because it's amorphous. There is no organization attached to it. So if you have hashtag anti-fascist in your profile on Twitter, could you be labeled as a domestic terrorist? Would speaking out against fascism or using that word cause you to be labeled as domestic terrorist? If you're in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong kind of clothes, can you be labeled domestic terrorist even if you're not a part of the protest?
But also,
so these are the questions.
But also, we need to be clear, because I always call out people that who I tell you, they don't have any core principles because they have selective concern and selective outrage. This is the definition of that. I mean, she knows it was an Antifa breaking down the Capitol windows on January 6th, storming the gates, trying to get into the chamber where that protester was killed for trying to climb the window. I mean, that's basically what she's attacking these protesters Saturday night for property damage, lighting police cars on fire. She's calling them
Absolutely.
them terrorists, but the people that stormed the Capitol by force. By the way, she's saying the American people are tired of Antifa attacking the police. Literally, these people killed some police on January 6th. Not all of them. Some people that were at the Capitol, were just there, but a lot of them were violently attacking police people to get through to the Capitol. So, I mean, this person has no core principle. It's all culture war, gin up the conservative base. And really what it's about, who is Antifa? What are the type of protests that Antifa is generally out? What were they generally out at in Portland for 6 months straight that they had a protest every night? What are the protests that Antifa are generally at? I mean, they vary, but overall, Black Lives Matter protests, protests against police brutality. I don't recall seeing police, circling around people's homes that won't get vaccinated, mandated, to make them get vaccinated. That's just nonsense.
If you recall, Marjorie Taylor Greene and others, she was one of several conservatives. Tucker Carlson mentioned this as well. The teacher strike, they were calling for better protections during COVID because teachers were getting sick, and just in general, better pay. They were calling them that an anti-fascist uprising in Antifa. People were labeling her, and others were labeling Chris Smalls Antifa. So this has been pointed at labor movements as well. And this idea that you can't, that I don't support violence, but at the same time, I support disruption. We're not going to have any change by not disrupting things. Things have to be disrupted. So these people sitting in the treetops in the forest in Atlanta are causing a disruption. Otherwise, that's the power that people have because we don't have the monetary power. We have the power of bodies, people, and disruption. And it seems to me that Marjorie Taylor Greene is more concerned with these windows being broken out of big banks on Main Street in Atlanta than she is with people's lives that will be impacted by the forest being torn down and the massive industrialization of police.
Right. And by the way, to be clear, when you hear leftists propping up Marjorie Taylor Greene because she's out lefting somebody on anything, laugh. I'm all for hey, Rand Paul, from time to time, I'll agree with him on something. Even if we hold disdain for certain people, if, a broken clock is right twice a day or whatever that is. However, she's full of shit. She's invested in Russia and Ukraine and this war. She's making a ton of money because she invested in Lockheed Martin on the day Russia invaded Ukraine. That was mysteriously missing from Marjorie Taylor Greene, virtue signaled in front of the camera that we shouldn't give money to Ukraine. Well, she's making money off of it. By the way,
It's ironic, Jordan. It's ironic because people will tell me, I criticize the squad because I look at the big picture of voting. If they went and passed Medicare for all tomorrow and started fighting for that, I would give them credit for that. But also I'd be a little leery on trusting because what I saw from the protest that Cori Bush organized on the ground in DC was that it started out what I think was somewhat positive, but then it went to celebrating Biden only doing a 60-day moratorium that left another 1.5 million still homeless and didn't really protect people from being evicted. And they celebrated that, and they, folks were there, journalists were there to ask questions, and Cori Cori Bush and AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, turned up the music and ignored the questions and said, let's dance, we're celebrating. But there was nothing to celebrate. So I look at the full picture when I look at the squad. And many of these people criticizing and propping up Marjorie Taylor Greene for like making one right take or whatever, one correct take, will say the same thing about the squad, and they'll say, look at the whole picture. Well, I agree with you. Look at the whole picture. Then you have to look at the whole picture for all of them. Look at it for Marjorie Taylor Greene as well. Look at it for people that we organize with. If David Duke came out tomorrow and supported Medicare for all, at least there's one more person supporting it. But I'm not going to stand on a podium and do a speech with David Duke in support of Medicare for all, because David Duke's overall a white supremacist, violent, white nationalist. So if we're not going to be able to, we say, let's look at the squad and the Democrats, let's look at the full picture every time they do something that's incremental, you know, that they might be right on this one tweet or this one thing they say. People say, look at their actions. I say the same damn thing for the Republicans. We have to look at their actions. We have to look at the full picture of what Marjorie Taylor Greene stands for. If we're not doing that, it's disingenuous to call her left of the left if you're not going to look at the full picture, but then say we have to look at the full picture for Democrats. I agree. Let's look at the full picture for all of them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sorry. I was having this argument today, so.
Well, let's stop pretending because she uses the word the establishment that she isn't the establishment. She's literally standing there propping up a $90 million militarized police compound. It doesn't get more establishment than that, which, by the way, reporting's coming out. They like to try to discredit protests by saying these are agitators from out of state coming in. You know, that's what they do to knock down protests. Well, it's coming out now that this $90 million police center, nearly half of the police coming in for training wouldn't even be from Atlanta. They would be brought in from out of state. Seems like a double standard to me. So if people cross state lines to protest for a cause, they're somehow not valid or agitators or up to no good or domestic terrorists, but you're building this completely unnecessary compound with nearly half.
They're also leaving off two really, really important points. One, there was 18 hours of deliberation at the Atlanta City Council before this thing passed, with more than 80% of people with complaints, hundreds of people complaining about this complex. Yet, even though there was massive outcry against this complex, the city council still voted in line with the corporations and not the people. Secondly, and other and Kamau talks about this in the interview you guys can find with Tina earlier this weekend. I believe it was on Saturday, so you guys can. Was that Saturday or Sunday? Sunday. She interviewed Kamau Franklin, who is an organizer. An organizer and a reporter for Black Power Media. And Kamau was talking about how, surveyed over and over again, 70 or more % of Atlanteans are against Cop City being built. So you can talk about agitators coming in from outside of the state to help or what have you. But the fact is people in Atlanta don't support this damn police complex. So it's a distraction from what's really going on. And it's not honest reporting. That's not honest journalism. Right.
Moving on from one cringe member of the establishment to the establishment, you know, inflation is still like very prevalent. Media is not covering it as much because in some parts of the country, gas has gone down to, I guess, somewhat digestible. I mean, by me, it's still over $3. I know by other places, it's still pretty hefty. But food is still very expensive. Rent still very expensive. Just living very expensive in this country. And most people, while inflation was significantly up, to go with the pandemic, were maxing out their credit cards to afford things. So things are really bad despite the rainbows and sunshine that the media likes to paint, the first Friday of the month, when they try to sell us on, the economy is doing great, the job number is down, the unemployment's low, GDP's up, yada yada yada. But apparently, Wall Street and mega hedge funders don't think there's enough misery, so they're sending orders to big tech, lay off more people. So if you haven't noticed, Amazon just laid off, I think, 18,000 people. Google is laying off people. A bunch of other companies in big tech, Microsoft. But Wall Street is telling them not enough. This is from Common Dreams. Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and other major tech companies have moved in recent days to lay off tens of thousands of employees, slashing jobs across the board amid mounting fears of a Fed-induced recession. Yeah, technically that's part of the story, but it's also a corporate price gouging induced recession by corporations that were price gouging. But the sweeping job cuts, more than 18,000 at Amazon, 10,000 at Microsoft, 12,000 at Google, were apparently not enough to satisfy ultra-rich investors, some of whom have taken large stakes in tech companies with the intention of forcing layoffs and other cost-cutting as a way of boosting profits. The decision to cut 12,000 jobs is a step in the right direction, but it does not even reverse the very strong headcount growth of 2022. Billionaire hedge fund manager Christopher Hohn wrote in a January 20 letter to Google CEO Sundar Pichai, quote, "I believe that management should aim to reduce headcount to around 150,000, Hohn added, urging the tech behemoth to slash tens of thousands of additional jobs. Elliott Management, a large U.S. investment firm, recently opened a multi-billion-dollar position in the software giant Salesforce, which announced earlier this month that it will be cutting roughly 10% of its workforce, around 8,000 jobs. Bloomberg reported Monday that Salesforce will probably be urged by activist investors such as Elliott to, quote, cut more jobs, make changes to the board, and spin off big acquisitions in search of a greater profit. Quote, investors greeted the news Sunday that Elliott has taken a multi-billion-dollar stake by sending shares up 3.1% Monday to close at $155, the highest price since the company announced co-chief executive officer Brett Taylor's departure. The share of other tech companies staged similar rallies in the wake of layoff announcements. So, not mentioned in this article, by the way, but I think important, Zaina, you were trying to get rid of a lot of these corrupt Congress people, but Nancy Pelosi's got a lot of investments in Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. So do all of these motherfucking politicians. Credit to the New York Times. I don't have it in front of me, but a couple months ago, they did a really in-depth piece on the Congress people with the conflicts of interest and went down the list of their investments and how they conflict with committees they serve on and their roles overseeing committees or serving on committees. Believe it or not, Ro Khanna actually had the most conflicts in terms of his investments. He says, well, it's my wife and son or daughter. I don't remember. Not me, technically, whatever. So
I'm not shocked by Roe. I mean, he endorsed Joe Manchin against Paula Jean and was like all hugging him in 2017. It was part of the reason that Justice Democrats and brand new Congress split. Roe has always been this way. I know people are shocked by it because he labels himself progressive, but if you look at his voting record, man, he votes in line with the tech in Washington State every time.
You learn something new every day. I did not know that he went with Joe Manchin. That's vile. Absolutely vile.
It was so crazy.
I'll have to bring that up. To his credit, he's the only one that will come on these shows of the squad or progressives in air quotes. But anyway, none of this is breaking news that essentially Wall Street treats human beings as, just check marks on a balance sheet. And we should say, a lot of these jobs that are being laid off aren't they're not all like the floor jobs in the warehouse. A lot of these jobs being laid off are more the white collar jobs, people in corporate offices. I actually know somebody that works at Amazon who told me a lot of the layoffs are coming in HR, white collar. There are layoffs happening in the warehouse too, but that happens a lot. I mean, JFK 8, which we covered for over a year before they won the union, it was nonstop hiring, firing, hiring, firing. That's their model. But the point is,
why not lay off the CEOs? Why start with the bottom, person who is using this to scrape by just to feed their kids and keep a roof over their head? Why don't we start with the CEOs? I mean, I could tell you it's because the massive Reagan tax cuts and shifts that helped to create this massive wealth gap, which is what all of this boils down to, really. This supposed inflation and now this supposed recession is all greed, and it all has to do with increasing that wealth gap and pushing it as much as they possibly can. But every time I hear about layoffs, I'm like, why not lay off the CEO? Why not remove the board then? Why not cut those salaries by 95% instead of laying off your everyday workers? That's where they start. They don't start at the top. None of these companies never start at the top. They start at the bottom, while CEOs, once they make these massive cuts, end up getting a 10, 15, sometimes 25% increase on their salaries year on year.
well, there's also another element. They're saying you got too much overhead here. You got to trim the fat because we have investments in all these tech companies and we're not making enough. Part of the reason you say you're not making enough is because when these companies were making a lot of profit, they bought back their stock so that you could make more money off of owning that stock through stock buybacks. So, I mean, the greed has no end. They want stock buybacks, they want higher dividends, and then they want you to lay off the people that are delivering those dividends, those stock buybacks. So it's just so disgusting and incestuous. And frankly, that's why the flag exists behind me, because we live in the United Corporations of America. This is what Build Back Better means. This is what, Joe Biden, whoever's doing his social media, puts out. My economic plan is working. I don't know what his plan is.
Make America Great, Build Back Better is basically the exact same slogan for corporations.
Right.
When it comes to the economic decisions and economic outlook, it's exactly the same. It is suppress workers, right to work laws. Let's lay a bunch of people off and instead hire temp workers that we can just shift around because people are desperate for work. Cut the bottom, cut the people who actually bring in the money, the people who are the pillars of any business are the workers. The workers who work from the bottom, to the mid-range. Those are the people that keep the engines running, that make the deliveries, that, keep the stock in stock, that, manufacture the product that they do. These are the people that are actually doing the work, or the company wouldn't exist. But those are the very same people that are immediately cut as soon as anything happens. And
Right.
You're right. It comes from this Build Back BS plan. That literally is a hamper on the working class. That's who it hits the hardest. It's not building anything back better for us. It's building more strength for the corporations that already have us over a barrel. There's a Supreme Court case, which we can dig into later, Jordan, on a different show, that is coming up about that has to do with patents. And we need to keep an eye out for that, because that's going to further expand corporate hegemony and further suppress small businesses, independent contractor work, and put more wealth in the hands of billionaires. And that's supported under the Build Back Better plan. The Build Back Better plan opened the window for this court case to even be possible. So we are seeing over and over again where Social Security, Biden has, kicked around the ball about Social Security being cut, and we're going to go into this soon, but Trump is now talking about saving Social Security. And that's, that's going over well, because Biden's saying, let's cut Social Security. We're not going to be able to, it's not going to be able to self-sustain. We have to increase the age on Social Security. So But I have not heard very much from any of our representatives on these massive cuts. Why doesn't the government come in with a bailout for the people, for the workers, right now? Why don't we introduce some basic minimum income to help with the false inflation and now false recession that we're seeing? But we're not going to get those $2,000 checks that were promised ever.
All I know is a few things, because obviously there's a lot of deflated progressives these days for good reason. A lot of people looking for something, some leadership, somewhere to go, some type of protest movement. All I know is that over a decade ago, there was something called Occupy Wall Street for this very fucking reason. These pig Wall Street scoundrel that if there was a just society would be in prison for 20 to 30 years for tanking the global economy during the financial crash, which Steve Grumbine has made the point, austerity kills. And that kind of fraud kills, because people do die during depressions, horrific recessions, foreclosures led to homelessness, et cetera, et cetera. None of them went to jail, period. Meanwhile, you got people protesting in trees to stop a $90 million police compound being charged with domestic terrorism. That's all you need to know about the kind of country we live in. The Bernie Madoffs of the world, he went to jail. Jamie Dimon, no, didn't go to jail. The heads of Bank of America, Wells Fargo, AIG, all these fraud banks and insurance houses, none of them went to prison, and they knew exactly what they were doing. And now they're still getting their bonuses. They never went without their bonuses, by the way, even throughout that. But now, over a decade later, they are calling the marching orders to essentially continue on this mirage of a strong economy. But it doesn't take long for me. I mean, I can't do it right now. I have a newborn baby. But all it took the last time I was out for 9 days. Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio. Took me a day to see what was really going on, which is an economic Hunger Games. You know it, living in Appalachia. There's an economic Hunger Games going on. There's a new Gilded Age. And deep down, like once you dig a little deeper underneath this mirage that CNN, MSNBC, Paul Krugman, he had this nauseating piece. I didn't read it, but I saw the headline. Is it morning in Joe Biden's America? Was the headline of Paul Krugman. People are just treading water to survive.
And it's happening in local, it's all the way from the state and what we saw in Cop City local. You had the racist implosion at the Democratic Party in West Virginia. And there it's still stacked with corporatists that are still behind Joe Manchin. I mean, they can BS right now about we're going to find a challenger for him. But I saw what happened in 2018 when Paula Jean tried to challenge them. It's the same people, the same corruption, people bending to big oil and coal in Kentucky and in West Virginia. It's still placing, it's still ravaging Black and brown communities for profit. It's the same. It's just the same hegemony. And anytime that you see mainstream media like bring on the CEO from Wells Fargo to talk about how our economy is getting better, or the state of our economics, it's BS. Like Steve Grumbine talks about this all the time too. They're all superficial numbers. The any numbers that are coming from Wall Street, the Dow, the S&P, those are superficial numbers because it's money that billionaires and millionaires are betting, like multimillionaires are betting to play ball. And it has nothing to do with what we are making as individuals, really, as regular everyday workers. The unemployment rate, it doesn't and the Bureau of Labor and Statistics is honest about this. The long-term unemployment rate numbers are not accurate. It doesn't take into account the amount of jobs and percentage that are temp work, which I do believe they're now considering starting to do reports on that. And I hope they do. It doesn't take into account the gig economy, which is now way up because millennials we can't find jobs that have benefits that are full-time anymore. We went out, we got the degrees, we did the thing that we were told to do, and now we can't find any work. So it's these inflated numbers on, oh, this company, Amazon had a 20% increase in revenue. The stock market is up 7 points this week. None of those numbers impact us. Every time I hear those numbers, I think Jeff Bezos just got a little bit richer. Elon Musk just got a little bit richer. The multimillionaires and the billionaires just got a little bit richer. I see the same thing when it comes to tax breaks and tax cuts. Those are never for us. We pay in 30% of our income, and yet, these millionaires and billionaires pay what? Sometimes nothing. Trump paid nothing, which I know we're about to talk about Trump, but he paid zero. So that's my big takeaway when I hear anything about inflation, anything about recession, is that it's just a big BS game, and these numbers are superficial every time. So look at the median income if you want to know how things are going in the country. Look at the unemployment rate. Talk to your neighbors. That's the best way to really know what's happening.
Another great way to know what's happening is to fund Status Coup.
Nice.
Another great way to know what's happening is to fund Status Coup. A lot of you watching already have done so much for us. So thank you, thank you, thank you. A lot of you watching are already Status Coup members. But this weekend, we're going to be trying to raise a lot more money to perhaps send Zaina on the road to cover what's really going on with economic exploitation. Obviously, Tina was just on the road in Atlanta covering Cop City. It wasn't her first rodeo. She was on fire. Would love to send her out there more. Lewis has done great reporting for us on the road. We might send him to the border soon to cover what's going on there, not from a right-wing Fox perspective or a MSNBC perspective that says nothing's going on here, but to really look underneath what's going on the border and try to tell the story from a real perspective, which is, why are all these people fleeing their country trying to come to America? Contrary to what they tell you, it's not because America is so great. It's because America, in large part, fucked up their countries, made them dangerous hellholes with no opportunity. So they're fleeing to America. So this weekend, both Saturday and Sunday, we have a mega show going on. We're going to have, I'll be hosting, Zaino will be joining, Tina, Ron, I believe Kim Brown, Steve Grumbine, Nina Turner will be a guest at some point, Christian Small, Stephen Donziger, Chuck Modi, who's a great independent journalist, Olemi Alori, who's an attorney and has been doing a great job co-hosting on The Hill at times. Frances Fisher, the actress who's in a new film about Standing Rock. Marianne Williamson, who obviously there's a lot of chatter out there right now about her potentially running in a primary against Joe Biden in 2024. Hopefully some other guests. I've been bugging Michael Moore's person, so hopefully that comes through. I've been bugging Ralph Nader's person, so hopefully we can get Ralph Nader, because I would love his thoughts on Moderna jacking up the vaccine price 400%, because Ralph Nader has made the point that Joe Biden, if he wanted to today, could take over the vaccine formula for Pfizer and Moderna and share the formula with the rest of the world, contrary to the, shall we say, just asking questions leftists. This vaccine has saved millions of lives. Of course, it doesn't stop the infection. We wish it did. But make no mistake, the data shows that the COVID vaccines have saved millions of lives worldwide. And unfortunately, we have variant after variant because a lot of third world, poorer countries don't have access to the vaccine or are vastly under vaccinated. And these new variants need receptors, which are unvaccinated people. So Ralph Nader has made the point time and time again that president has emergency powers. We funded the vaccine research and we could take it over. But again, that is the real insidiousness of big pharma, that we're allowing people to die all over the world so that Moderna and Pfizer could become filthy rich or get.
It's not just that, you know, it's with everything. You can look at insulin. It was jacked up. All of the healthcare costs in the United States in general are jacked up. It's time for Medicare for all. Biden could do that tomorrow as well. And so could the House and Senate.
Yep.
Where is that? We wouldn't even be having these discussions about the vaccines. People can get them, not get them, whatever their choice is, but it should be free. And it should be a public service as well as other, you know, our healthcare should not be commodified, period. Outside, you know, the vaccines are included in that bucket, but in general, our healthcare should not be commodified, and we should, you know, catch up with the rest of the world and take care of our people's healthcare.
Carpe diem. Cuba is hard at work sharing vaccines. Correct. And by the way,
Right.
Alan, I think you found this clip a while ago. A clip does exist during the Democratic primary debates. Biden said coronavirus treatment will be free. Well, go ask the people nearly bankrupt from the hospital bills how free that treatment has
He
been.
also said treatment would be free. So what about all the people with long COVID?
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
So treatment for COVID would be free.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you're screwed. You're screwed if you get COVID. I mean, ask Steve Grumbine. He was hospitalized. He had to do a GoFundMe. I think he was hospitalized for a week. I should ask him next time he's on what that hospital bill was like.
I was too. I had I was hospitalized shortly after having COVID. I had a stroke. So I was in the hospital for 7 days. My bill is $85,000. I had an intracranial hypertension that I still have now from COVID, and now it's turned into long COVID. So that's like encephalitis. It's swelling in the brain. They said the symptoms are similar to a brain tumor. So sometimes if I lose my words, guys, or $85,000 when I got the bill, I just laughed. What the hell do you do with that? You're not going to pay it. You know, I'm poor. I'm poor, you know, I don't have that and don't have any health insurance currently because I can't afford it. So you kind of just out there with the bill, an impossible ask. But I'm not alone. There are millions of Americans that face the exact same thing, and that's why I mention it. It's common.
Yep, absolutely.
I know we had one more subject. I didn't want to ramble too much. Did we wanted to cover our one last thing, right?
We're skipping it because I gotta go step in for the baby care. But maybe tomorrow I'll get. It's basically Trump and the potential imminent indictment. If you didn't see the Georgia prosecutor, who, if Trump were to be indicted in the Georgia case, this would be the person bringing the charges. Says that an announcement on charges is imminent. On if there are going to be charges, I guess we could play the clip. It won't take long. Colin, could you play the clip just to refresh people? Trump's infamous, all I need is 11,000 more votes.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Mr. Secretary, was the president here asking you for exactly what he wanted? One more vote than his opponent.
What I knew is that we didn't have any votes to find. We had continued to look. We investigated, like I just shared the numbers with you. There were no votes to find. That was
so somebody's so two things. I actually thought that yes, this is Donald Trump. Yes, this is the United Corporations of America. I understand people who think he ain't getting charged for anything. I actually thought it was very likely he was going to be charged on the classified documents because it was a very clear-cut case. It's not like January 6th, which is harder to prove that he was directly involved. I mean, he had the documents. There's a timeline. His lawyers lied and said and certified that he had returned all the documents. Apparently, by reports, he directed his staff to move the documents after receiving a subpoena. However, although I personally think Biden having classified documents and now Mike Pence today, apparently he has classified documents. Although I don't think legally it should matter, these cases should all stand on their own three legs. We know that's not how the real world works. And I think that Trump might get off in terms of the classified documents because of how it might look to charge him and not Biden. Personally, I think Biden should be charged too by the standard of if Zaina or I worked for the government and we had one classified document at home, even if we just forgot that we had it, they'd put us in prison and throw away the key. If we were a mid-level person, it doesn't matter. If you have classified documents that you are not authorized to have, you would be charged. So Biden, by this count, has over 20. He's not going to be charged because he's the president, and unless something changes, by all appearances, he's cooperated, and it doesn't seem like he's hiding them. They definitely hid announcing it to the public before the midterms. Anyway, I say all this. I did think Trump was going to be charged before Biden and now Mike Pence, because even though they're not the same thing, and I think Trump's by the facts is a lot worse based on the obstruction of justice, from the political angle, everybody could just throw up their hands and say, it's the same, and you can't charge one president and not the other. So to me, in terms of criminal indictments, the Georgia thing is the most possible in terms of an indictment for Trump at this point. Because I think with January 6th, it's just very tough unless you have some smoking gun with Trump directing or being directly involved with Oath Keepers or Proud Boys or any of the planning, or on the day being directly involved. There's a higher burden of proof for like seditious conspiracy and those kind of things. What got Richard Nixon? The tapes. He could have been criminally held liable, but President Ford pardoned him. I mean, this is very black or white. He's on tape trying to conjure up votes. I think it breaks laws in terms of Georgia laws, but also federal laws. The secretary, within that tape, there's more to it. It seems that he's also threatening the Secretary of State of Georgia by saying this could become a very dangerous situation for you. If it's like the mob boss, like, I don't think things can get hairy here. I don't want to say one way or the other because it's Donald Trump and the American judicial system. I think it's 60-40 that he will be indicted over the Georgia thing, because again, I don't know legally.
Well, he's covering his own butt by keeping these documents, right? If that can be proven that he was using it to cover for himself. Now, I think that way too much is considered and labeled as, see, I'm drawing a blank right now. I think way too much is covered and labeled as classified to begin with. But I also support Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning for being, for having protections for whistleblowing and having their charges dropped and erased. But at the same time, when I look at Trump and I look at Biden, one thing I think is it's really stupid that these presidents were just carrying classified documents like home with them. That's kind of insane to think about. The second part is, what documents do they have? Why? How does it tie to any other investigations going on? So I think there's, in general, a greater context. the two cases may not be the same, depending on what type of documents they had, whether they suppressed the documents being returned. There's a lot of layers here. Can't stand Biden, don't like him, don't think he's a good president, so I'm not defending the man. But when it comes to a case, each case is on its own. Like you said, has to stand on its own 3 legs. So, what I think the reason why Trump and the motivations for why he had the documents and what he was doing with those documents are relevant to his particular case. Same with Biden.
Well,
if Biden had documents he was hiding at home so that they wouldn't be in the presidential archives, that's a problem too.
Well, with Trump, the longevity of it, I mean, there was a year back and forth between him and the National Archives before DOJ was even tipped off. So Trump knew that there was requests for this back, but then you've been subpoenaed and you're actually directing your people to move the documents. So that's the obstruction of justice part. And by the way, unless we find out something different, I mean, Trump had nuclear information, identities of spies, human sources. I mean, every Joe Schmo and Dick and Harry is coming in and out of Mar-a-Lago. Like every day. I'm not saying, and by reports, Trump was pitching his people on offering DOJ trades as if these were his documents. So objectively, if you take off your partisan hat, the Biden-Trump thing, it's not on the same playing field. Trump was worse. However, Biden, I believe, if that were you or me, we would be charged for it. He's not going to be because he's the president and he was the vice president and different rules for different folks. But in terms of, because Biden now has this against him, now they have Mike Pence. I think this should not come into play, but the Justice Department has to take in political considerations at how it will look if we charge one but not the other. Even though the facts are very different. So that's why I think Trump might have gotten a get out of jail free card on the classified docs. On the Georgia thing, I don't know, because he's on tape saying, just find me these votes. Hey, it might get dangerous for you if you don't do this. I mean, that seems pretty clear to me. However,
as well as testimony from other Secretary of States who have stated that there were similar conversations. This one's on tape. But there were other Secretary of States who spoken about very similar conversations with Trump. I mean, all Republicans, but and then to have their testimony and then to now have it on tape confirms the other testimony.
But
other testimonies from other secretaries of state.
There's also another element. Politically, Trump being indicted might be what saves him politically. We know legally it would drag on for years, an actual trial. But I don't want to say sinking. The polls are way too early. Remember, there was a time when Scott Walker would have been a shoo-in as a Republican governor from Wisconsin running for president. And all these Republicans Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, had a very high approval rating. But then when they jump in and face media scrutiny and their skeletons come out of the closet. So DeSantis right now is riding high and dry. By all accounts, a lot of people find him personally very awkward, not charismatic, and not ready for prime time. So Trump could have that martyr thing going for him if he's indicted, where MAGA people who might be straying to DeSantis in polls right now. Remember, some Bernie people kind of strayed initially towards Warren, but then came home for different reasons, but came home to Bernie when Warren, it became clear she's, a fraud. So if Trump is indicted, legally, it would not be good, obviously, but politically, he could fundraise and be a martyr. And you better believe he'd be back on Twitter within 10 seconds if he gets indicted. We'll see. But this prosecutor says an announcement is imminent. I personally find I don't know legally how you could justify not charging him. What can you classify this call as? Unethical? untoward. I mean, I don't know how you would classify pushing an elected official to break election law. That's what that was when you're trying to falsify.
All presidents shouldn't be above legal scrutiny, and all of our presidents that we have had have made massive mistakes that they should be held accountable for. So, regardless of if they've ran before or, if they were elected in a former president or a president currently, no elected official should be above the law. Even people that served in the presidency.
Absolutely. All right.
But I look at it as, all of our presidents have engaged in criminal activity. The bombing of other countries, in my opinion, is a form of criminal activity. The use of the AUMF overreaching is a form of criminal activity in my mind.
I mean, maybe we could
is it in our laws? No. Is it unethical? Yes. Is it criminal on a global scale? Yeah, I believe so.
could probably do a whole week.
And that doesn't excuse Trump. It's just I feel like Trump can be a distraction from everything else that's going on sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, I mean, Status Coup and me, we'd probably be over 1 million subscribers if we would have went that route and just did Trump and Russia every day for the last 5 years. So we've chosen not to. I started covering Trump a little bit more. I'd say Mar-a-Lago raid, him teasing he was going to run again, just because of the rise in fascism that I'm seeing. And Zaina and I were texting earlier. There's multiple types of fascism. There is the racial white supremacist form of fascism that we're clearly seeing on the right. It's been brewing for years. I think a lot of MAGA was kind of that white grievance revival party. To be honest, that's what I saw when I was covering multiple campaigns. And then you have the neoliberal corporate dem form of fascism, which is just, the merger of the merger of the state with corporations. Obama said, let it play out, as his Department of Homeland Security and FBI was working with private contractors to beat the living hell out of Native Americans at Standing Rock and environmental allies. Remember, Obama was on tape. Let it play out. A young woman, Sophia Walensky, I recall, 21 years old, had her arm nearly blown off. They had to take parts of her leg to build an arm because the police fired a grenade at her at Standing Rock. We're lucky nobody died at Standing Rock, but the PTSD and the injuries that people had, a lot of Native Americans died a few years later. And I talked to them, and they believe it was from the trauma and stress that created health problems in other areas for them. So that went on.
You got them working together because you've got, Biden, who was under the deporter in chief, Barack Obama. He is now in charge of immigration. Immigration's Enforcement and Customs still stands under the Department of Homeland Security, which is also a new agency that's been horrific. It's still privatized. Immigration is still privatized. Tiny kids still don't have lawyers when they go before an immigration judge. You still have people being separated from their families at the border. Title 42 has been implemented, which was instated under the Trump administration to now block Cuba, Venezuela, and Haitians from seeking refugee status in this country, even though we're ravaging Haiti. We're ravaging Haiti right now, and our embargoes on Cuba causes problems for that country. So it's literally, that's racist. That, he's operating our immigration system under a white replacement theory complex. So, sometimes, and I feel like they're separate, but they also work together. They're all corrupt at the end of the day. And I believe that the Democrats, just as much as the Republicans, work to hold up the white supremacist hegemony that we have in this country. That's economic, that's social, and push go fascism, just like the Republicans are pushing for. I've seen Democrats work to uphold that as well. And they both work to uphold the economic fascism. Republicans are absolutely economically fascist as well.
And to be honest with you, I mean, this is a longer story. If Zaina, if you were with Status Coup at the time, we could have dissected.
I lost you, Jordan.
You got me?
We got you back.
This is a longer story, and if you were with Status Coup at the time, we could have dissected it. I think one of Bernie's biggest faults in 2020 and one of the biggest missed opportunities, I don't know any politician that would have let Joe Biden as a candidate lie as much as he lied about his civil rights record and about his record in terms of the crime bill. And he went to South Africa and met Nelson Mandela after he was released from prison. Total lie, made it up, that he marched in civil rights. His book, he literally wrote, he never marched in civil rights. Said nothing about him palling around with Strom Thurmond. I mean, the list goes on. The crime bill, which Bernie could have said, the difference between you and I, Joe, when I mess up, I own it and never make the mistake again, because Bernie did vote for the crime bill, even though at the time he warned about the mass incarceration threat. He voted for it because it had the Violence Against Women Act provision. But he said the prison industrial complex is going to become a lot worse. He was on the floor speaking out against it. But Bernie, for a variety of reasons, didn't go after Biden. And I know for fact, you know this too, there were people on his campaign screaming to the high heavens for him to go directly at Joe Biden on the crime issue. Biden would have, on the racism issue, Biden still would have won South Carolina, but not by 30 points if you actually go heavy. So anyway, I digress.
What I wanted him to say, the third question after he said, I wrote the damn bill about Medicare for all. The third question was about the crime bill. And I really wanted Bernie to say, you wrote that damn bill. Because he did. He wrote the crime bill, and Biden was making all the excuses for it. Bernie should have turned to him and he should have said, you wrote that damn bill, because he did. And Biden loves to skirt around that and talk about, well, we showed it the other day on this show when we were on with Ty about how, the crime bill actually helped and it's not racist. But good old crime bill Joe, he's pretty racist. I mean, he told black people if they didn't vote for him that they didn't support the country.
They said you ain't black.
That they weren't authentically black while he was running. He just said that 3 years ago. We may have short memories, but no, Joe showed himself while he was running.
Indeed. All right, folks. Gotta go. Reminders. Tomorrow I'll be back. Kim Brown is off this week. We have big shows coming up this weekend, so put it in your calendar, noon to 3 o'clock Eastern. Saturday and Sunday, we'll have that great guest lineup: Nina Turner, Marianne Williamson, Francis Fisher, Stephen Donziger, Christian Smalls, Chuck Modi, Oleme Alori, Zaina, Tina, Ron, the whole guest, Steve Grumbine. Also, I believe tomorrow, I think if everything goes well, we'll have an interview Tina did with one of the Cop City protesters who was arrested and charged with domestic terrorism. That person is going to be anonymous. So Colin obviously has to do a little editing to protect that person's identity. So we should have that tomorrow. Wait for that. And again, if you can, it's up on the screen now. On the ground reporting, it is very expensive. That's why most people don't do it, in addition to being lazy. It's expensive to send a reporter, a camera person between flights, hotels, rent a car, all of it, food. We don't have any corporate fat cats funding us. We're not funded by big banks, the fossil fuckers, big pharma, big real estate, Silicon Valley, military industrial complex, George Soros, or the Koch brother. Our funding comes directly from you. So if you become a member, that's how we're going to grow for the long haul. I know sometimes people need to cancel, tough economic times. If you got $5 to $10 a month, please consider signing up. StatusCoup.com/join so we could do more on the ground reporting. Anything I left out, Zaina?
If you have to go take the baby, I can stay on to read the super chats because I don't want to overlook those before we go. And also subscribe to our Substack. We are setting it up to where we can give all of our subscribed members a Substack package so that you can be subscribed if you join through the StatusCoup.join. But also check us out on Status Coup at Substack. We will be getting out some more written pieces, but also giving updates and notifications for when we're going to go live. And he already left. Bye, Jordan. Let's go through these super chats really quickly. Let's see. Henry says, a Facebook friend of mine posted about Cop City. I responded by posting 3 Status Coup videos. He hit like on all 3. Thank you for helping get the word out about Cop City, Henry. We really appreciate that. Tony D said, I saw the video of the forest. Tina did do a tour of the forest. So beautiful. You can check out, where the people were. It was demolished by police forces, but there's a lot, and there was a beautiful memorial there for Tortuga as well. You don't like my music. There's also an element of both sidesism. The right have their terrorists, so the left must have theirs. A good point. KV variable, pretty normal to see media echo and misrepresent protest in favor of police. Seattle pink umbrella riot was cited by Como News as a protester investigated event. That's a good point. Despite footage showing the opposite. Pretty positive. Cosmos footage jumped around the timeline of things. Sinclair owned, not so shocking. It is true. The media will twist what these protests, and they'll also, report on what's sensational and can get them clicks instead of bringing the facts and viewership. Tony Dallas, $2. Thank you so much, Tony, for the super chat. Mega show. I am definitely watching. Marriage is Fire. I'm not sure what you mean by marriage is fire, but I hope that you join the mega show. We would love to see you there. And thank you so much, Tony D. Nikki O'Brien, thank you for the $4.99. Please, Mike. Please, Ralph. Go Status Coup. Love you all. See you this weekend. Yes, would love to see Ralph Nader. Hopefully we can get some more people to join us this weekend. Robin Bennett, thank you for the $10. Thanks for helping keep Status Coup afloat. And we have Nikki O'Brien. I screamed at the TV, call him a liar, Bernie. Right, Nikki, me too. I was getting so frustrated during the debates. I felt like Bernie could have really brought that fire. On the last one, he did a little bit, but it was lackluster. It was lackluster in his interviews. And then when he came out and he said, Biden's my friend, that's not what you want to hear. And I think that that's when a lot of leftists became disappointed in Bernie, to say the least. Well, I want to say thank you also to all of our subscribers, to everyone that follows Status Coup, shares the content, helps support the work. Thank you guys for joining in the chat. It was a lively chat today. Always love to read what's going on and hear the back and forth. Again, thanks for sharing out the stories. It was great to see everyone today, and we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.